Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh from Inner Skilled, and today I have Michael Rizzo with me. Michael, what's going on today?
Hey, Josh, just got back from a meditation retreat and loving life, getting recharged from dealing with the world, which I generally don't have to do much of being out there.
Well, that's cool. You were telling me a little bit about it before. Maybe we can get into that. But where I want to start at with my standard, boilerplate question here.
Uh-huh.
You can answer it as surface level or as deep as you want. Who is Michael Rizzo, and what kind of work does he do?
Well, I used to be a teaching golf professional for the last, give or take, 40 years. But once I started working on the book about, I think it's 13 months ago, I decided that as much as I love teaching golf and I'm very good at it, at least by what my clients tell me and the results, I just said it's time to go a different direction and write full time. I can influence many people, many more people, thousands of people, hopefully tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands by writing and taking all I've learned and putting it in the written word and in interviews than I can teaching a couple hundred people a year.
Well, right on, but you haven't said about what yet and what kind of writing, even though I've got a little background from
Sure.
from what we started on. And then I want to just put a comparison here real quick, because even though you probably won't change my mind,
It's okay.
I look at golf. What is the Mark Twain saying about golf? Is it's a good walk wasted, or
Good
it's
walk
also
spoiled.
yeah, also called hoof and mouth disease, where people hoof around all day and then mouth about it the next. So I want to know, like, how this overlaps here. To me, I'm seeing a disconnect for some reason, but it's probably due to my own lack of wisdom and insight here. But yeah, tell me about your interest in what you're doing now, and how it does or doesn't overlap and correlate with golf.
Well,
So I don't
given
know
that
anything about. I'm completely ignorant about golf. I've played like two or three times in my life. So
I
you're
can I can basically tell you that it's the most difficult sport in the world, emotionally, physically, mentally. It'll wear you down if you play the game because it's not like playing tennis or playing baseball or football or soccer where you basically retain your skill, or like riding a bike. You don't just forget how to do it. With golf, you can go out one day, even an hour later, and totally have it fall apart and say, what the heck happened? And also, since I wrote the book that's coming out in October, it's Finding Joy in Daily Living, my coaches for the book said, Michael, you have to put golf in your book. I said, okay, all right, I get it. And then she told me, you have to also write a book on golf. I said, okay. So I put a chapter in, and basically it overlaps things like patience, which is one of the chapters. And it takes tremendous patience to play golf. It takes perseverance. That's another chapter. And solitude is something, if you just go out and play the game by yourself, nobody else around, late in the evening, it's peaceful out there. There's this inner sense of calm that just kind of comes over you, at least if you look at the game that way. People can go fishing and just fish, or they can say, oh my God, I love fishing by being out there just with the sun coming down and the moon maybe late coming off the water, and the peace and the quiet and the birds in the distance. Whatever people take, they can wrap their own life around that. Golf for me happens to be one of them, and just a very difficult sport that led me into all the characteristics I learned from the sport that I naturally could transfer into the book.
Well, cool. For those who are not familiar with what you write about, I don't think you have mentioned that yet at all. Even though if the people can see your background here, you do have a I don't know if it's a Buddha Rupa or it's a meditating form. So that might give listeners and viewers some kind of hint. But let's jump into kind of your bread and butter now, so to speak.
Well, Finding Joy in Daily Living started about a month after my wife Nance passed away from ALS. She had been suffering with that for really at least 2 years. She had been bedbound for over a year. And once she left the body, and she was a very high spiritual being, once she left the body, I just had this epiphany, you need to write a book. And it started out being called Fulfilling Your Life from A to Z. And I said, well, 26 chapters, the 26 letters in the alphabet. And I started calling the first chapter like acceptance for letter A. And then B was beliefs. C was compassion. D was discretion, and on and on. Well, as I kept writing, I said, well, you can't leave out certain words that are powerful in your life and how they've influenced the way you've become and how you live your life. So you need to add this chapter in, and then this word in, and then this word in. Well, they kept growing. And by the time they got to 72, I said, that's enough. I couldn't come up with any other words without forcing it. And those became the 72 chapters, which in essence are taking anything people go through in life, Josh, anything. And the answer is in there in those 72 chapters. You don't have to read all of them. Pick one of them. Say you're impatient. Go to the patience chapter. Say you don't feel like you're compassionate enough toward people. Go to the compassion chapter. Say you want to get Michael slant on God. Go to the God chapter. Say you don't feel enough gratitude. Go to the gratitude chapter, and on and on. And this is really how it's evolved. It's taken about 13 months to this point. And I would honestly say, Josh, it's 99% done. I expect it to go to the next level of edits in the next week, and then on from there to final formatting and then printing.
Well, early congratulations on the book, and yeah, that's great. I've written some myself on a blog and put it together, but it's not the same as just sitting down and doing a single book project. I've yet to do that. I'm still too intimidated by it, and and yeah. So if I could throw you a curveball here,
Yeah,
but
go
it
ahead.
is on the topic, and most people wouldn't think death is a part of life, but in a way it is. So I'll just jump right into the deep end here and
Sure.
ask if that made the book, or if you're allowed to say, and even if it didn't, what are your thoughts on preparing for that? And then if you want to just if we can jump even deeper in here about cycles of rebirth and how you feel about these, and yeah, we'll just start there, I think.
I'll answer as best I can the multiple questions within your question, and anything I miss, you bring back up to me. Death is very simply a cycle. I don't care if it's a tree, a plant, a river. Look at the Grand Canyon. All right, Grand Canyon didn't start out being a mile deep. It took millions and millions of years, maybe billions of years. So everything in this earth plane has to come to be and pass. I remember our meditation teacher had said recently, because I heard this in an audio I had listened from my original master from passed away in 2005 or left the body in 2005. He said, even a stone will change. It has energy, very small amounts of energy compared to a human being. There's different levels of it. He said, but it will eventually not be what it is as you look at it now. So everything in the earth plane changes and evolves. If we're afraid of death, we're basically just saying, I don't want to accept reality. If you don't understand, and I'm referring to people, myself included, if we don't understand we're going to leave the body, how are we going to prepare for it? How are you going to live your life in a way that says, well, where am I going after I leave? I'm going somewhere. I don't really know. But as I was saying when I was a kid, I asked myself this question. If there's black and white, night and day, and then I grew up Catholic anyway, which was devil and angels and heavens and hells, well, if I was wrong, I'd rather err on the side of being a good, kind person who believed that there were hells rather than living my life in a way that I just said, I'm just going to live any way I want. I don't care. I think it's just going to happen the way I want it to happen. And then what happens if there are hells? So I didn't want to live my life that way, and I haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we both then agree that nihilism is not the answer. There's this extreme of nihilism where things are so bad. So I just want to, the more I can destroy and annihilate and turn to nothingness, that will solve basically the problems. I'll be happy. So we both know that's an extreme that we don't want to follow. So on the other extreme, we have eternalism, And it sounds okay on the surface to me anyway. I'm just expressing how I feel and look at it. But then, okay, what if I want to, so to speak, escape eternalism? Too bad you can't. Not an option. But no, I'm really done taking life after life after life after life, forgetting about it, not knowing where I come from, not knowing where I go, having to go through the same unsatisfactoriness on good days, basically, and even if it's not, it's latent there because everything that arises is going to pass away. You mentioned a stone, even the highest mountains will eventually, over vast spans of time, will be leveled. Great oceans dry out, cycle after cycle from beginningless time. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too far out here, but okay. So let's say it's done. Sorry. So that, to me, eternalism, and I'm not saying you hold this view, but I am wondering though if you are, and it's okay to we talk about this and flesh it out if you'd like. For me though, that's just another trap, right? Or it could be a potential trap because I don't know. Of course, I'm speaking not from personal, not from direct knowing here. This is going on kind of what I intuit and a certain faith, but then again, so we take it with a grain of salt because I can't speak from my own direct knowledge on this, at least yet. So I could be totally wrong about all this. And so, but like to be able to escape that, then if just overly philosophizing here, if it goes on forever, I can't. And then there's another problem. Then if it does go on forever, well then I've got all the time in the world to figure it out and do whatever. And then there's no really ethical motivation ultimately. I mean, yes, we can impose it like you mentioned there, but not everybody would be like that. Because if we take this to the extreme, there really is no incentive to act ethically if it's eternalistic, because I can just fix it later, eons and eons from now. So anyway, I would just maybe got a little bit too far in the weeds here, but do you have any thoughts or feelings on eternalism and how to view this, or what the alternative between these two extremes are?
I'll use the words of this lineage of masters, which is not any one of them. Life on earth is birth, suffering, death. And the cycle repeats: birth, suffering, death, birth, suffering, death. Until, and you had said something, Josh, about your own personal experience. Master Kripal had said,
lack of personal experience, my lack of personal experience.
Yeah, well, all of our lack of experience, we only know, at least in this world, we only know what we know through experience. We don't know it because somebody else told it to us. So Master Kripal had said, believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see. And when I heard that, I thought about my life and I said, there are many times I saw stuff and I was wrong. I thought I knew by watching something, and I couldn't even be sure by seeing it that what I was perceiving was accurate. And hearing it, it's all secondhand information. So I will tell people, if they end up with my book, if they end up with Finding Joy in Daily Living, when you hear me talk about things in there, unless it's somebody I've interviewed, it's my personal experience of it. If I tell you that I saw my wife Nancy drop to the ground in the middle of the hallway, leave her body for 3 or 4 minutes, as if she was literally dead, and then come back into her body and stand back up again. And then when I was with her, when she left the body permanently, and her head dropped like this, and she didn't come back in her body, well, she's not here in this earth plane anymore. Now, where she is in the upper realms, that's another story. That's something I can't know, you can't know. Only she knows because she's the one experiencing it. So I don't know if that answered part of your question.
Well, it's yeah, but it, of course, like answering many questions, it opens up plenty more, right? And what you framed there around that, I would agree with most everything, except for maybe the last. I do feel that there are potentially some advanced seers and spiritual people that can see and know where what you're considering your past wife went. Do you know what I mean? Like there are people that can do that. I can't personally feel confident enough to say I could do that at this point, right?
I can answer that too when you're done with your question.
Sure. I would just, and then
Address it.
the only other thing is this notion of belief and disbelief. So the way I got around, and yeah, I would agree with that. The way to even look at the whole thing differently, is for me, there's really no requirement to believe or disbelieve. Because usually we're given this black and white option. I either have to believe this or disbelieve it. But to me, the alternative, because there can be a lot of emotional investment in belief. So
Sure,
if the truth comes along, flies in the face of my belief, that can
Mm-hmm.
be devastating. So a lot of times we double down. No, I'm going to believe harder. No, it's got to be. But that's like, so when make truth the goal, then whatever comes at me, I take as information. So I don't have to believe or disbelieve it. And so it's a way lighter. There's no huge emotional investment. And then I can just keep adding like a feather with more information if it's helpful, or I can easily discard it. And then there's not so that's the way I get around this. So, but in that context, the thing applies, the wisdom you're talking about really applies there, because we have to see, it has to be seen and known for each wise one for themselves. We can hear about something, but then we have to go and investigate it and see and know it directly ourselves. That's just how it is.
By the way, Josh, when you mentioned the word devastating, and really absorb this, it's devastating to your ego, not to who you are. The ego is not who you are.
And
the ego, right, is the opposite of the soul. The ego is the mind that tries to keep us thinking and we can solve these problems through our mental faculties. You can't. You can't solve a soul problem through your mind. And that's what the whole world's trying to do.
Yeah, it's almost a sickness, varying degrees. It really is. Yeah. So okay, the other thing I said, the seers. Yeah, you said you were going to comment on. Yeah.
So the seers can see up to the level, and I'll use an analogy. Imagine that you grew up in a slum, and from the slum you moved out of the slum and into a tenement, but it was better than the slum. And from the tenement, as you grew and got more educated, you eventually had an apartment. And from the apartment, you moved into a small house. From a small house, you moved into a big house. And then you ended up in a mansion. Now, when you are in the mansion, you can tell people what it's like to live in a mansion, but you can't tell them what it's like to live in a mansion when you were in the basic house. Make sense? When a person has ability to see and perceive beyond the physical realm, they can only see to the level they've attained. And beyond this physical realm, it's not like earth, heaven, or hell. There's more than that. There's planes, first plane, second plane, third plane. It goes up. And when you get to what's called the void, that's the space where so many spirits and so many saints and so many souls get stuck. That's the barrier between the lower planes, astral plane, causal plane, supercausal plane, then the void, black, then God on the other side. Unless they've gone to God, they can't tell you what it's like to know God and to be at the highest level. They can only tell you. If they've stuck at the astral plane, my brother Frank, when he left the body, my guess is he was in the astral plane because Nancy had the ability to hear from relatives that had passed away. So she would say to me one day, years ago, hey, your brother's here. This is only 4 days after he left the body from a heart attack, after he had COVID at 58 years old. She said, your brother's here. I said, what's he saying? And she told me what he said. And he came 4 different times. Well, the 4th time he came, he said, it's way better up here. Gotta go. And that was the last time he came. Now, Nancy could perceive where he was in this astral realm. If Frank was beyond that void and he was with God at the highest level, and Nancy wasn't with God because she was still here in a physical body, then she couldn't have contacted him up there. She could only contact him to the level she was at, which she was at that level long before she started meditating. She just came into the world with this quote unquote gift. But a lot of gifts that people perceive to be gifts are not gifts. They're how do I describe this? They're deals they have with the negative power, that they get to use these abilities that they think are really good. And the challenge is, because they haven't lived in these highest planes, they don't know the answer to this, but they actually think they do. So these are all things I've learned in my years of meditating.
It's funny, you kind of read my mind there, and that's where I was going to go next here is about discernment, and you already touched on it there. And before I do that, just wanted to make a quick comment about the devastation. What I have found, though, about that is if we allow it, it can reveal deep truths about ourselves, because then they look into, well, why, okay, I'm devastated by what happened. What is that trying to reveal? A deep truth within me, and it's if there's a silver lining to it, I would say that could be not to run out and go seek the most devastation I can do all the time,
Sure,
so I can reveal deeper and deeper truths, but once it happens, I would, that's when I heard that teaching, then I looked and wow, it can.
Part of quote unquote devastation is really karmas. We all come into this world with karmas. When I was young, I could never understand why, for example, Josh, that maybe I was 18 or 17 or whatever to start dating. I could never understand why I would hear about these relationships where a man was with his wife, let's say, and he was beating the heck out of her, and she never left. She stayed. And I couldn't make any sense out of this. Why would a woman stay with a physically abusive, mentally abusive, verbally abusive man? Well, then as time went on, I learned that a lot of things that go on that we can't fathom are karmic relations from past lives. And if that's the case, this person's got to go through it. I went through some karmas with my wife. She had certain things happen to her. And I just went, oh my God, how can anybody suffer so much? Because her karmas were difficult. Her teacher had said, my dear, early on, said, my dear, before I knew her, your destiny karmas are very difficult. And I watched it for 25 years. I watched how difficult karmas can be, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. Destiny karmas.
It's a really good point. Now, I would just, the way I approach it is that's the fruit of past intentional thought, speech, and action. And we all have it. And we don't know until we know exactly how these many causes result in these many effects. It's very complicating. In fact, the Buddha instructed, it's one of the imponderables that you can go mad contemplating all. I mean, we can't study it and know it a little bit, but all the things involved in it, you can go mad trying to figure it all out. So go ahead. Yeah. So that fruit, and I would just say to varying degrees, right? I don't know how about the extreme version, but I will say that what we do seemingly have a choice is how we view what's happening to us.
Absolutely.
And then how we respond to it, as well as what we pay attention to and how we pay attention to it. So whatever's happening, a lot of times there is a degree of that it might not seem to help or make any difference when we're going through it. But if there is just that slight chance to choose how we view it and how we respond to it, what we pay attention to, how we pay attention to it, and the intentionality behind it, that's what matters, because we can't go back and change what's already been done. But every new moment is now a new chance, if there is a chance, or what I just said, that's what matters. That's where the emphasis is placed, and that will pay off in the future. Will have consequences in the future, good, bad, or otherwise, so to speak. So yeah, that's where the historical Buddha, he placed the emphasis on the now. And and then the other challenge is when somebody's going through such amazingly, mind-meltingly horrendous things. I don't want to bring this up then. That's not helpful, right? Oh yeah, you just did it all yourself in the past. That's not helpful at all, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a tough one, and that's, like you mentioned, the compassion. And I do want to get into the joy here too. I mean, we're hitting the challenging stuff here, but yeah. So I just wanted to put that in there as well. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, joy is on the other side of all the hell you go through. That's my experience. I didn't become joy filled until cancer diagnosis over 2 years ago, Nancy's diagnosis with ALS, and then all the hell that went between that and dealing with it. I came out the other side with joy because of all the things that I went through. I don't know if people, maybe a rare person is born joyful, very, very rare and unusual. And that has to be past lives that they've gone through probably a lot in their past lives to bring them to where they just came in joyful and they saw everything beautifully and truthfully as it was. Because if you don't see things as they are, I call it reality. If you can't say, this is what happened, how can you adapt to it? You can't. You have to accept everything that happens, whether you like it or not. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it. I had a dead battery last night at the meditation center. 7 o'clock at night, getting ready to go meditate, battery's dead. So I had to wait for AAA, had to let him take an hour to get there. But you know what? Then I watched how God works. Use whatever word you want. Universal life force, God, it doesn't matter. The thing that created us, however word people want to use. And I had this book that I was giving to one of the meditators, and I made sure to have it in the car the night before because I had to drive 4 hours north here in Florida. And I realized I had a second copy sitting there on the floor. And I said, you know what? I don't need that second copy right now. I should just put it back in the house. But my intuition said, no, leave it. I don't know why, just leave it. So I gave the one copy to Jason, and then the tow truck driver, we get into this conversation. This guy, and I'm praying he follows up with me because I said, your story's too good to not put in the book. I was waiting for one more story under encouragement, and I didn't have a story. I couldn't. This guy was shot in the chest with a 45, lost 3/4 of his blood. The surgeon said there's no way this guy will probably live, let alone ever walk again. Not only did he live, but he walks and he's normal, healthy again. I mean, it's just shocking. The things this guy went through. They tell me the story, the tow truck driver. And this is how things work. I trusted the book. I gave him the book. He told me about the guy he talked about too, who's a naturopathic doctor who was put in prison because he was helping people heal things naturally. I said, I got to talk to this guy. So you see how it all unfolds like this? And you can't try to control the future. You have to do the next thing, trust. Do the next thing, trust. Do the next thing, trust.
Those synchronicities on the path like that too
Yeah.
is those are
Yeah.
really heartwarming, and
Yeah.
they just kind of good signposts along the way too. I feel I remember times in my life when a lot of those were happening in succession, and it was just almost weird because I thought
Yeah.
this shouldn't be happening, or maybe I was just seeing too much. But I mean, I don't think coincidence. I don't really. There's no such thing as coincidence, there's
No,
causes and
not
conditions
really.
behind everything, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to circle it back and get to joy just in a little bit, but I feel like
Sure.
this loose end is hanging out here about this more metaphysical things we could say about seeing into other realms. And I think in the Buddhist tradition, it's called the divine eye, developing this supranormal or super mundane power. They call the divine eye, or call it clairvoyance, and things like this. So yeah, I don't know the details of how this stuff works. It's fascinating. I'm glad you shared about you can only see into as far as you've experienced before. And yeah, and like I say, I don't know in kind of the Buddhist teaching is called parami, kind of your past actions and the past things you've done that will build up good results and things like this. And levels of concentration is usually how it's taught to develop very high levels of attainments within jhanas, and then specialized trainings to develop a divine eye. And yeah, I don't know, so I can't really comment on the extent. I think it would also depend on, like you're saying, and I say too, of what kind of training one's done in the past lives, and kind of what the different causes and conditions and training, how far and how deep they can see, and things like this. So yeah, it's way beyond my pay grade to know these, to know exactly how all that works. But I will say though that Yeah, as we both have experienced from being around certain people and have no reason to doubt that even though we don't know the ins and outs of the mechanics of it, we're barking up the right tree, so to speak, I think. And the thing you noticed or you said about, and I've heard this too, about certain beings presenting themselves as things they're not. So that's what I wanted to ask if you have any advice on this, because when I talk to kind of people with psychic abilities and things like this, one of the first things I want to know is how do we discern this? Because as you mentioned, some of these beings, they are some of the people with abilities are actually getting these abilities from beings that don't have really a lot of people's best interest in mind, that it's more service to self and that they're somehow getting powers. But it seems a lot of that is being, it can be unknown to the person receiving the powers or the beings behind that. I hear stories of how what people see in visions and different psychic traveling or experiences, full blown things, that what appears to them is an illusion, that there's certain beings cloaking themselves and imposters things and presenting themselves as something they're not. And because the person experiencing it, they don't know about this or know how to discern this, they're actually being deceived themselves, So like you said earlier, the truth and really knowing what's true is kind of has to be the guideline here. Otherwise it's just, it's all deception or not true. So ideally we want to get the truest things that we can on a conventional level and eventually an ultimate level too. So I guess the question here would be about discernment and things like this, when it comes to these matters.
Difficult, Josh, because virtually everybody in this world is deluded. And when I say that, you were talking about referencing the third eye, call it whatever you want. You got chakras that start at the lowest, down where the genitals are, they work their way up. We've all seen pictures of the 7 chakras and so on. The third eye is the highest chakra. Now, most meditations and most people who do anything with spirituality will talk about the lower chakras and working their way up. When you find an enlightened master, they've already accessed here up. They don't go down here. So pranayamas are out, psychic healings are out, Reiki healers are out, and so on and so forth. There was a wonderful story. It wasn't a wonderful story that one of our teachers had told, and it was a Reiki healer. And by the way, I tinkered with Reiki before I learned meditating. And this man had these powers, and he was healing people left and right using Reiki. Everybody was getting healed from all kinds of sicknesses. And this was going on for a year, 2 years, however long. And then what happened was this man who was doing all these healings started to get very, very sick. And for a long time was suffering unbearable sufferings in the physical body. Then he died. Every person that he had healed then slowly but surely over time started getting sick and suffering and dying. That's not knowing. That's thinking you know and not knowing. Whenever I have a person say to me, I went to a psychic or I'm going to go to a psychic, I go, be careful. That's all I can tell you. All I can tell you is be careful, because they have the ability to see beyond. My wife, Nance, before she had learned this meditation, I told you she came into the world with certain abilities, we'll call them. I won't even say gifts, because everybody thinks these things are gifts. They're not always gifts. She would astral inside. She'd go in to meditate. She had a friend in California, and she was in St. Louis. They would go inside. They would send an object back and forth between each other. Then they'd come out, and Nance would say to her friend, "What did you send?" And the friend would say, "An apple." I said, "That's what I was seeing inside. And I was sending it back to you." And so they're doing this stuff. Now, after she learned our particular meditation from an enlightened master, he took away everything that she ever saw inside, like that, gone, disappeared. She could never access any of it because they were often lower powers. She was seeing them as cool, fun, neat things. Master goes, "No, these are not gifts. These are curses." And then he took it out of her. And then from there, he said, "Now you start from ground zero." And then, of course, she meditated for 39 years. When she was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, her one of her ex-husband, well, her ex-husband Dolph had passed away. I met him once, by the way. He passed away. And when he left the body, she said, Dolph is here. I said, oh, what's he saying? And she would tell me what Dolph was saying, because I met him one time for a short while. And he came every day for about a month. And finally, after about a month, Nancy goes, because it wasn't bothering me, she goes, Dolph, you have to stop coming. Like, I have a life to live. And that was the end of it. He never showed up again inside. Now, when she would describe Dolph to me, wherever he was, because she talked to my brother, my mother, my father, her mother, her sister. And I was with her when she talked to her sister. So anyway, he said, Dolph is way, 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 way up there. Of all the people that passed away, and you can't go by what goes on in your physical life thinking that that's going to tell you. Dolph was an alcoholic who was violent. He couldn't stand to be around people's energies. They couldn't go to movies because if they did, like a movie theater, he goes, I can't handle these energies. We got to get out of here. He could never stay because he could perceive all the energies of people around him. And so what we think we know about what's going on down here, now, I think I'm living my life in a way that's pleasing to God, to Creator, whatever word we want to use. I don't know. I'm just doing what I think to be more kind, more compassionate, more loving, more forgiving, less judgmental, and truthful. And if I do that, I go, after I leave the body, it's up to you. I don't know where I'm going after this, but I'm going to live the way I think I'm supposed to live. And I try to guide people as best I can to live whatever life they want to live. I never share with somebody, you need to do what I do. I say, you do what you need to do, and then you trust your inner wisdom. But one of the great phrases that Nancy said to me, I never forgot. And I use this all the time, and anybody can use it, because nothing to do with spirituality. Does this decision bring me peace? You'll never go wrong if you go inside and ask yourself that question about anything. Simple, complex, deep, surface level, doesn't matter. Does this decision bring me peace to go out to dinner tonight? Yeah, it does. I need time to myself. Or, no, it doesn't. I'm trying to escape my challenges and I want to go stuff my face, so I'm not going to do that. Get the idea? Great question. Great question.
Thanks for that, Michael. I have the wisdom of, is this really worth me giving up my peace for? Which is the other end of that. But I love it how you framed it like that, for actually using it as a guide for decision making. So that's great, really lovely, because peace is the highest happiness. And it really is. And I really appreciate your advice and guidance there. That's right. We kind of we connect with the teachers that we find helpful and resonate with, and we get teachings and we try them out, and then we have spiritual friends, right? And then we can lean on them and they can lean on us, and then we can check out if we're going too far astray or not, and these are wonderful things. And at the end of the day, that's right. Like we were talking about earlier, we have to see and know this for ourselves. And you bring in the faith element here too, which is so important, I think, at least for me as a Westerner, where it doesn't come as naturally, I think, in some of the Asian, little I've observed in certain Asian cultures. There's an overemphasis a lot of times on wisdom, but the faith really, when it was just mentioning this the other day to someone, that when the wisdom's not there, wisdom can kind of cut through, it's great, of course, and everything is surmountable by wisdom. It's just when it's not there, I rely on faith and bright faith. So we look for these bright guideposts and see that that's possible, and I can test out what they teach for myself and see if it works for me or not. And it will just, this faith can take us almost mysteriously to where we need to go and what we need to do. And it's a big measure of success in spiritual practice, I find too. It will help that wisdom and faith overcome this doubt, this hindrance of doubt too, or help address it as well. So Yeah, and what you say about the challenges in the Reiki thing, it's right. And I get reminded of this time and time again by that, that we're just seeing the human, right? There's so many people that aren't seeing what's behind the human and the subtle and the unseen. And just because I can't experience it doesn't mean it's affecting the other person that can experience it. And so, yeah, this takes a kind of a delicate kind of care with the loved ones we have that have these abilities, and also I think faith and trust, and a kind of negotiating and managing, and when we need to go out, and we have to be around people that aren't attuned and sensitive and is understanding and caring about what could potentially be going on. And in fact, that's putting it nicely, right? Yeah, what do we do? How do we interact with those people and reassure them, but not lie to them either? So this, as you've probably had plenty of experience of what I've heard called the base program, interacting in the base program, right? So yeah, it's just this notion of sensitivity and care, and then this knowing how to operate and trusting how we can operate when we have to go outside our kind of protective zones and interact with the world too. So one of the things is have this double awareness, right? So we have the kind of the more spiritual awareness on the deep, subtle realms, but also being able to operate when we need to within the world, the base program. And to people who don't get it, they won't get it maybe, and have no interest in getting it. So yeah, I guess my question here is, do you have any advice for like either partners or caretakers, and interacting with people who just don't get it, and don't really care and get, want to care, and how to navigate and manage those situations too?
First thing is, Josh, you don't have to have them get it. That's rule number one. You don't have to have them get it. It's not our job to get anybody to get anything. Our job is to be authentic to who we are. And I remember Master had said, don't cast pearl before swine. If you're having a conversation with somebody who obviously doesn't want to or can't go where you might want to go, it's not our job to make them get anything. I just let people be. When the opening is there, then I share. When the opening isn't there, then I let go. I know that I only control one thing, which is true of every human being: our decision or our choice. That's the end of it. There is no control beyond that. That to me is the biggest way to get happy in life and to be more at peace with yourself and other people, is to say, hey, it's not my job to control them. I'm not supposed to. The controlling and the over controlling is ego. It gets back to the ego likes to be in control. The ego doesn't want to be out of control. And when you don't, I remember Master had said, he said, if you have two people and one person wants to fight with you, that would be the ego. He said, if you don't fight, how long will that other person be able to fight? They won't be able to. So you don't fight. You step away from that and say, I don't need to be right. The guy said the moon is orange. So if he wants to believe it's orange, because it would create an argument to say, no, it's not. So well, that's great. You see it that way. Have a great day and then walk away. You don't
Yeah,
have to be right. Being right is a huge ego thing. I don't need to be right about anything anymore.
I wish I would have learned these two lessons a lot sooner than I did, And I learned the hard way that, yeah, that I don't have to convince anyone of anything really.
We all
And
go through it.
yeah, exactly. And then it is my preference these days, of course, is to be well instead of right. It used to bring this kind of false satisfaction of getting it right, but it takes a way back seat to being
Yeah.
well and peaceful, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And this notion of joy, I want to get to that. These Brahma Viharas, these divine abodes or states of the heart, kind of the best operational ways to relate to people I found these days. And the one that is called it's called mudita, or vicarious joy, or rejoicing, or being happy, altruistic joy, or I like it, vicarious joy. So there's like this boundless state that I can be happy for people's happiness. There's no limit. This is the tough one for me, because the tendency it can be fall into jealousy or envy. But when I can genuinely be happy for other people's happiness, and wishing for it to continue and increase and never stop. How many billions of people are there now? So if that's that many chances for us to increase our own happiness just by being happy for them,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the notion, of course, kindness, of friendliness, this unstoppable friendliness of loving kindness, wishing, good, goodwill. I'm the first recipient. I wish myself well and wish
Sure.
others well, all beings everywhere well. Of course, compassion, and when that meets some difficulty, and then instead of sinking down in that difficulty and having two people in suffering, then they can be like transformed and transmuted. And then, of course, equanimity, like you're talking about, this peace that I'm not responsible for anyone else's choices. We're all responsible for our own choices, and we'll reap the consequences, good, bad, or otherwise. And as much as I care and want to help, at the end of the day, I can't choose for them. Everyone has to choose for themselves. And it brings this wise, grandmotherly wisdom and peace, that kind of underlies the other three. Yeah. So yeah, I think this might be a good time to start wrapping up. Do you have any more details on the book that you would like to mention? And if you have any other events, what other services you offer other people, maybe plans in the future you want to share about, or anything else you haven't mentioned. And then why don't you leave with a final message today?
Sure. So the book itself is called Finding Joy in Daily Living. And it basically is my life's work, if I died tomorrow, that I felt could leave a guidebook to people that they could randomly page through it, through the chapters, and pick anything that jumped out at them. If the word question jumped out, which is one of the chapters, then I would say, read the question chapter, teaching you to ask questions if you're going to evolve. Or if it was the patience chapter, or the nature chapter, or the wisdom chapter, which, by the way, is the last chapter. And it has to be, because wisdom, you evolve to having wisdom. You don't get wisdom, right? You have to evolve. That's the last stage as a human being, is to be wise, to see things as they are, to care about all life, all humanity, all animals, all plants, and so on. There was a wonderful story about one of the initiates with one of the past masters, and he was walking in the wintertime down a path, and his jacket, his winter wool coat, was open, and it happened to flap and hit a bush as he walked by. And the teacher turned to him and said, "Button your coat next time," because he had hurt the bush just by leaving his coat open. He never had his coat open again. From that point forward, he always buttoned it up. So that's where the master or the teacher was firm, because, like, be aware. And you don't forget words like that. So anyway, where I'm going with this book is to make it like a guidebook for people, that they think, if they keep a religious text on their desktop or their table or their somewhere they see all the time, that they might look at this book as something they can always reference whenever they're suffering. It doesn't matter. They could lose a parent. They could lose a child. They could have a divorce. They could get fired from their job. They could lose a friendship. They could find out their best friend was having an affair, and they can go to it and find the right chapter as a tool. Beyond that book, I expect that to be a very popular seller, because I'm going to promote for the next year. My whole life, I've quit teaching golf, which I did for almost 40 years. I'm going to do this full time, and I'm going to do what I don't do, which is go out in public, because me and our cat, my cat Baji, that's my life, and it gives me all this sense of peace. Now, working on the book and promoting is going to bring in another aspect that I know I have to go through and suffer if I want people to find this book. After that, I've already written a poetry book, which I actually found out I had written these poems, the majority of them 35 years ago. And I looked at them and go, man, you were kind of in that spiritual place 35 years ago, not where I am now. And so I'm going to put it together. And when the other book is out and running, then I'll get the poetry book out in a way that is only intended to influence people's lives, not just for me. It's not about me. It's about, can somebody read it and go, wow, that really got me to think about one of the chapters. I won't tell you which one it is. It reads, so you don't, I'll tell you what it's titled. It's called A Mother to Her Daughter is the title of it. It's a short poem, but by the time you get to the last two sentences, that's the first time you know what it was about. Up until then, you don't know what it's about. So it's a surprise shocker, like, wow. Now, do I reflect and do something? Or do I just go, wow, that was not what I expected? So that's pretty much going to be, and then I will write a golf book because all my database of clients want me to write a golf book, and it's going to be a spiritual / golf book. That's pretty much where my life is headed. And then truth is, Josh, day to day, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. There will be definitely plenty of talks on cancer because I've now been 2 years plus surviving a cancer that you're not supposed to be able to survive without medical. And I've done no medical, none, zero. And that's shocking to even my oncologists. And when they see the scans and go, it's no worse. It's like staying the same. They're not metastasizing, which means growing cancer. And so it's all good. That's kind of where I'm headed. Oh, and by the way, the website is findingjoydaily.com. There's all kinds of sample chapters in there, giveaways. There's an interview with Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul series. You can find all kinds of things that are, even if you never get the book, even if you never get Finding Joy in Daily Living, you never buy it, you never get a copy, you can still learn from what's on the website. And I'll always be adding more things to help people.
Very cool, Michael. Oh, I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and beautiful way of explaining joy and a lot of challenges too that we find in all areas of life and beyond. So, with that, may all beings everywhere come to find their greatest and most optimal joy for themselves and all beings everywhere, and may all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free. Bye now.
Thank you, Josh.